My name is Kevin Brown, and I am the SVP of EcoStructure Solutions at Schneider Electric. And in that role, one of my responsibilities is looking at industry trends, particularly in data centers, and trying to ensure that we are aligning our portfolio and our strategy to those trends. And that is why I want to share with you today some of what we call, there is no plan B. We've got to start addressing sustainability in data centers, and we need to achieve it in a different way than how we've been thinking about it in the past. And we don't have all of the answers here, but we wanted to share some of these thoughts, and we think Schneider has a role to play as the industry takes on this new and exciting challenge. And it is no longer a question about, does the data center industry work towards sustainability? It is clear it has got the attention of C-level in many organizations. 99% of large companies agree that it's important to their business. It's, in fact, 49% of the world's GDP has countries that are legislating for net zero emissions. That's an incredible number when you think about it. Half the world is now proactively looking to legislate on this topic. And perhaps what I find most important is investor expectations. Shareholders now are demanding that companies be responsive and report on what they're doing around sustainability. So it really is no longer an option. This is something that the industry must embrace. Or we run the risk of being left behind. And by being left behind is if we don't proactively address this challenge, we run the risk that others will do it for us. So it's no longer a perk, it's a competitive advantage. The regulations will come, and we need to proactively get ahead of this challenge in order to help direct it in a way that we think is the most responsible for the industry. We need to be participating in this conversation. So that's what we really believe. And what's fantastic news is these industry leaders on this slide are already committed. They are already publicly announcing what they're doing around sustainability. And that is a fantastic development. The question, though, is that enough? If these 5 companies are able to put together a sustainability approach, is that enough for the industry as a whole? And the answer, in our opinion, is clearly no. And if for no other reason, if you look at what's happening with the edge, and there's many models around this that exist in the industry, even if we solve the data center challenge and become sustainability, our model shows that in the near future, more than half of energy consumption in the IT industry will happen outside of data centers. And when we say edge, we have a very broad definition. It's basically what used to be server rooms and wiring closets we include in edge in this conversation. So there's no question that's going to happen. And in fact, we've published our model in the form of a trade-off tool that you can access on our website, because if you don't like the assumptions that we've made, you can play around with the different assumptions of how fast will edge energy consumption grow versus data centers and what efficiency. And no matter what you put in, it is clear that edge is a big energy consumer now and in the future. Therefore, we have to address this as a whole industry, not just from a data center perspective and not just from the leaders in the industry. But it's not easy. If we do a very simple Google search talking about sustainability, you get this list of terms that you can see here. And these were not hard to find. So this is 52 buzzwords. Where is it that I actually start? What do I actually do is a challenge. And this is part of what we're trying to help the industry understand and simplify. So for purposes of today, fundamentally, sustainability works on a number of different vectors of water, land, soil, atmosphere, forest, and are we responsibly using all of these is really part of the full sustainability story. However, today, just for simplicity, we really are focused on what's happening with the atmosphere. What is about the carbon footprint and what about greenhouse gases? What does the industry do in order to become actionable on this front in a comprehensive way? So we should be proud as an industry. We have made tremendous progress on our efficiency. If you look at we've eliminated a tremendous amount of waste in the infrastructure. And here's a couple of data points showing that we've made this large improvement in PUE, which is a great metric, although maybe inadequate in some respects. It certainly has given us something to rally around as an industry over the last 10, 15 years, and we've made progress. However, it's very easy to argue that we are hitting diminishing returns by using those. We're not going to be able to repeat those efficiency gains in the future by just doing what we've done in the past. So we must start thinking differently about this problem. Efficiency is not enough. And efficiency is only one part of environmental sustainability. Greater efficiency alone will not significantly lessen the resource impacts, okay? Which means we need to look at our supply chains as well. It could be more than 5 times the emissions than our direct operations is in our supply chain that is supplying the equipment coming into the data centers. So we need to look at all of this. It is not only about efficiency, it is about our comprehensive vendors and community and ecosystem that we're working with is what's going to drive our conversation in the future. And it's clear the greenhouse gas protocol is addressing this by defining 3 categories of emissions. So first of all, scope 1, which is what are the direct emissions that I'm having on my site? So if I start my generator, I am generating emissions, that is scope 1. Scope 2 is what are the indirect emissions I'm getting, which is largely the easiest way to think about this, is the utility where I'm getting my electricity, what are their emissions for what they're supplying me? And then scope 3 is what I was referencing before, is what about the supply chain that I have? And what are the emissions that are used in order to deliver that supply chain of equipment into my data center? All 3 of these are being tracked and are metrics that we have to be addressing and looking at. And the good news here, again, is you can go and find the leaders in the industry. Facebook and Microsoft in these examples are publishing what their scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions are. The challenge, however, is that they vary greatly in their numbers. And the challenge that we have is the frameworks are established. We know scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Those are clear, but there's no standardized way to report on those. There's no standardized way to go and look at one data center versus another and compare scope 3 because of the way these frameworks are written. And this presents a challenge for us as an industry, and we need to start working on how do we perhaps get a more standardized approach to this, or at least a standardized process for how we want to address scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3. So this is part of what we wanted to discuss today, is share with you some of our opinions and views as what is the approach to address this sustainability challenge? How do I get started, and how big a challenge do we have? And you may ask, why, as Schneider Electric, are you credible to talk about this? And the reality is we started our own sustainability journey internally 15 years ago. And we've been recognized by many organizations, one of the best places to work in 2020. We've made commitments according to the UN Sustainability Development Goals. And this is a topic that is within, and you can read our annual report on what is the progress that Schneider Electric has done ourselves on sustainability. And we're very proud that this year we were named as one of the most sustainable company in the world. And I can tell you, though, we aren't done yet. We still view that we have a lot of work to do ourselves in order to reach our own sustainability goals. So given that, we thought we were in a good position to start talking more externally about how do you take some of the things that we've learned and apply those into the broader industry. And that's really what we're here to discuss today. And our philosophy on how we approach this is there's really just 5 key drivers. And I know there's a lot of text on this slide. It really comes down to some simple things. Set a bold and actionable strategy, implement efficient designs, drive more efficiency in operations, buy renewable energy, and then start working on decarbonizing your supply chain. These are the 5 key drivers that one needs to comprehend in order to say, I've got a comprehensive sustainability strategy in place. And we're going to talk about each one of these as we go through the presentation. So first of all, setting a bold and actionable strategy. Let's talk about that. So in our experience as we've been working with companies, there's 3 common pitfalls that prevent companies from reaching their climate goals. First of all, it starts with, does corporate strategy really define clear objectives, and are they prioritizing the actions? Number 2, misalignment of internal expertise and resources that are necessary to work on the challenge that need to work together tend to be siloed. And so that is a second challenge. And we've heard this many times in our industry about silos preventing maybe some of the clear objectives that we have. And then the third one is, how do I put together a business case to justify and fund these projects? And though all 3 of these together can make it difficult for companies to get started. And there's evidence of that many providers need to get started, because 451 has done some research in this area And here's some high-level conclusions out of the report, is number one, driver of sustainability, it's a customer requirement. Okay, customers are now requiring to understand their multi-tenant data center provider, what is the sustainability objectives that you've got. 97% of respondents in the survey said today they have customers that are requiring in the contract sustainability commitments. But what's interesting and slightly disturbing is that 43% of the data center providers said they do not have a comprehensive sustainability program. So roughly half of the respondents to the surveys are saying they have no plan, or it's not comprehensive. And this is a challenge that we need to address. So let's talk about organizational silos. In our view, in our experience, you have at least these 4 areas that historically are siloed that must start working together to develop an integrated strategy. So, you have a data center design team. They aren't necessarily working with the procurement team on what is the energy supply that they're getting or what might we be using. You have an operations team that gets the design. They have to operate it efficiently. And then usually there's a separate sustainability organization trying to understand the carbon footprint. These 4 groups need to start working and planning together if we are going to be successful at addressing this full scope of data center sustainability, and it needs to become an integrated strategy. And so that much is clear. And making the business case on this, it requires a couple of things. So first of all, there needs to be strong executive sponsorship to support the customer and investor requirements. If it doesn't come from the CEO that sustainability is a priority, what we've learned is it's very difficult for companies to get started. And I can tell you within Schneider Electric, our CEO is extremely vocal about his commitment to sustainability, and that has a major impact internally in our organization on the way people behave. So it starts at the top, and that is no question that needs to happen. But the second thing, when you talk about putting together a business case, and I've had conversations with customers on this, is you need to put a value on your carbon. And there's a few different ways that you can do this. One, the most obvious, and many companies are publishing that they use an internal carbon price when they use their business cases. So if we're going to go build something, the finance team will put on me $100 per ton of emissions per year, or some other number to value the carbon that you're using. But that's not the only way. Other companies, for instance, will just put a cap. So they take their operations and they say, you only are allowed to emit a certain amount of carbon per year, and that starts driving business cases in a different way. So whatever the right way is can depend on the situation and the company, but somehow we must be putting a value on our carbon, or I don't see how we can claim that we are serious about sustainability. And so this is the interesting dynamic that we see happening. And it's because of this complexity of getting these silos working together, getting better planning in place, helping the chief executive officers take a position on sustainability, that we launched what we call our climate change advisory services. And so this is a service that we've created based off of what we've learned and from what we've already been doing for the last 15 years with other customers, is helping customers put together a plan. How do I put together an actionable strategy? And so it's very simple. Define success, set targets, deploy your program, and then make sure that you're sustaining the results. We think are kind of the 4 key elements that need to happen. And we certainly, with our experience, think we're in a position to help customers define these programs. So let's talk about efficient data center designs for a second, the second part of our approach. So implementing efficient data center designs, this is a model that we did a few years ago. And basically, if you took a look versus 2006 versus 2016, just by making some very, basic architectural improvements and design improvements in data centers, we reduced 80% of the losses. So now this is a theoretical model that we built, but there's many data points out there that support this. If you take the average PUE of data centers in 2006 versus 2016 or 2020, you can see that there's been a big improvement in the PUE, and we should be very proud of that. But it's not enough now to only think about efficiency, as I mentioned before. We really need to take a more comprehensive architectural design approach. So I'd say, typically what we've done is started at what we have on this pyramid is we've really just focused on the bottom piece of that pyramid is, hey, I've got this design, how do I make it as efficient as possible? And what we identified in our experience is that actually generates a lot of waste. And that really there needs to be a more comprehensive approach of very diligently starting with what are the needs that you need at the operational level? What is the mission of the system? That translates into what are the functions that I need to perform that mission. And then, and only then, do you actually start putting together a design to meet that. So what it implies is that you only are going to build what you need to meet the mission of the system and avoid overbuilding, which is a historic problem that we've had and a challenge that we've had in this industry. So to give you, I won't read everything on this slide, but it gives you a sense of, we took a look at some of our reference designs that we've done of 2015 versus 2020, and we were able to, by taking this approach, we eliminated 30% of the capital expense, 22% due to less equipment installed in a smaller footprint, but we delivered the equivalent power. So this is an example of where you can make great improvement on your sustainability goals simply by doing a more solution-based design process. So we need to rethink. Efficiency is not enough. It's also about, are we building what we need to fulfill the mission of the system is the approach that we need to migrate to. Secondly, as part of that is when you do that design process is how do you prioritize circular design? And we're going to talk more about this, but it's beyond just what is the product I'm buying, what's the capital expense, and what's its efficiency when it operates. But it's going to start evolving into a conversation more about how do I reduce the size and weight? If I reduce size and weight, I reduce my carbon footprint. What about serviceability so that I can extend the length of service of this device as long as possible? The longer I can keep something in place, the lower carbon footprint it has. And then the question is also, is it designed so it has a second life? And we'll talk more about this, but this needs to be a priority when you're going through your design approach. It is not simply about what is the best product I can buy at the lowest cost and the most efficient. There's this other element now that is starting to come into the conversation that we all need to be sensitive to. So let's talk about operations for a second and how do I drive efficiency in operations? So the data center of the future, here's the one thing we know, and if you agree with these bullet points, it's, again, it's always fun to have these debates. These are some areas I would say is there's going to be more interaction with the grid and renewables. There's probably some level of variability as IT loads get more efficient and start spinning up and down their own power consumption. Probably a mix of cooling architectures, really more sites to manage when you get into hybrid environments. As I started at the beginning, we think about edge and data centers, where all this equipment is. But what's really important is it's likely going to have to be done with the same or with less staff. It's unlikely that we're going to be able to keep staffing to the level that would be needed if we just keep doing the same thing. And that's going to be a challenge just on the people front as well. So we need to be talking about software. We need to be talking about analytics. We need to be talking about how do I get the services in place. So it's a combination of devices themselves need to become connected. They need to become more intelligent so that we get visibility to them, whether they're on the edge or in data centers. Are we having the right software tools to help us manage that and understand where the equipment is? And then do I have a strategy on lifecycle services to ensure that I'm maintaining and recycling and extending the life of this equipment that I have installed? So what is the operational efficiency that I have to maximize the lifespan? So we need to be thinking about this. And I don't pretend to think this is all new. It's not, because we've been doing this for a long time as an industry. We've been implementing software to manage our cooling infrastructure, our power infrastructure, our IT space. And in our view, in Schneider's view, these are three major architectural blocks that we've been talking about for at least the last 15 years and thinking about what are the tools and systems and how do you get the right information integrated around each of those. But sustainability is driving a new area that we need to start thinking about software, which is what is my resource dashboard for sustainability and energy efficiency? What do I put in place so that I can get a report and know what my carbon footprint is and know how I'm doing against those goals? And we don't believe that the traditional software that we have on the left-hand side of this slide is adequate. We need to start thinking about new dashboards, new types of software that will help us answer those questions. And we have what we call a resource advisor, which allows us to do this today. So, what are my carbon emissions? What is my energy procurement? What type of energy am I procuring? Is it clean? How clean is it? And helping with project planning and risk management, this is all something this tool can do. So it's not monitoring our traditional infrastructure. It's extending that into some other areas that we maybe haven't historically done as an industry, or maybe it was limited only into the sustainability office. This needs to be brought into the core part of the operations of a data center today so that everybody gets visibility on what are the carbon targets, what are our other sustainability initiatives, and are we achieving those? And then ultimately this extends into lifecycle services. So again, not only thinking about how do I maintain and extend, but in addition, what about modernization that you can do? And what are the things that you can do to improve what you may already have installed? So we all know we have data centers that have been installed for a while. How do I, have something where I can leverage innovation and efficient technology? How do I right size the new infrastructure? Maybe I only replace the active components. Maybe there's pieces that I can stay. So there's a combination of, how do I maintain, but also how do I modernize? And we need to be thinking in these terms as well. So I wanted to touch a bit also on how do you buy in renewable energy and the strategies associated with that. So organizations are sourcing renewable energy for a number of different reasons. Again, stakeholder pressure. They want to be able to have a reputation that they are driving towards net zero. Just an internal concern about the environment and how do they reduce the impact of climate risk. So there's a number of reasons that organizations are sourcing renewable energy, but it can be a confusing topic. And this really gets to scope 2 emissions, as we talked about earlier. In general, there's 3 ways to address these scope 2 emissions. First of all is that you can buy energy attribute certificates, also known as renewable energy credits in the United States. And at the end of the day, these are things that underpin almost how all of renewable energy is tracked and traded globally. So in other words, you can just go and buy these and get a credit for renewable energy. The second one is actually doing your own on-site and distributed generation. So you can install your own solar farm and hook it into a microgrid, and you can directly consume that energy, or you can sell it, have it associated with an energy attribute credit. So you can connect to the grid, or you can work it as part of a microgrid. Either way, but this is where on your own site you're putting in some kind of renewable energy. And then finally, there's off-site generation, where it's not directly connected to you, but usually through a power purchase agreement, a PPA, you can buy and help fund renewable energy projects that then you can take credit for. So there's really those 3 attributes. And the important thing to understand is you got to take a portfolio approach to these, because not all of those same tools are available in all of the geographies around the world. Some of them, it might take a long time to put in place a power purchase agreement, whereas a renewable energy credit or an energy attribute certificate, the timing on that might be much faster. And so there's a number of different issues that play into this, but generally our recommended approach is, first of all, the more energy efficient you are, the less problem you have. It always starts there, because then I don't have less that I have to purchase, less that I have to worry about. If you can, maximize on-site generation, pursue off-site PPAs. Then for short term or to balance out any gaps that you have, then look at renewable energy credits. And then what are additional clean tech that you can look at as part of that as well. So typically what we see, and this is just meant to illustrate how we see customers approaching this problem, is maybe to get started, you start in 2018 and you buy some attribute certificates, and then you're able to, as you get in 2019, some on-site generations coming in place, you find some tariffs to take advantage of, and then as it takes a little bit longer, but you get in place the power purchase agreements, and then you can layer in extra power purchase agreements, in this case 2025, and eventually maybe you have a combination of all of the power purchase agreements, tariffs, on-site generation, and attribute certificates. So all of those happen and work together, and they're all levers that you can take advantage of from a portfolio standpoint. So final topic is about decarbonizing the supply chain, and this is perhaps maybe the biggest challenge that we have as an industry, because scope 3 is perhaps the biggest carbon footprint that you have. And we love this view of an iceberg where the majority of the problem is underneath the surface, and this is a problem you don't know. And embodied or embedded carbon is a key component of scope 3. So Facebook claims that 96% of their total carbon footprint is actually in scope 3. It's in their supply chain. Schneider itself believes it's about 99%. So even if I do a lot of my own direct emissions and I do a lot on my indirect emissions from my utility, I still have the biggest part of the problem is coming on scope 3. So what do I do about scope 3 is a complex discussion, and you can see these are kind of the key levers to reduce scope 3 across the supply chain. But I can tell you for data centers, as we look at it, there's a couple of areas that are really most important. First of all, the equipment you're buying is probably one of the biggest drivers of your carbon footprint. So the supplier and customer engagement is really important. What do you do on renewable energy? Think about circular economy, and then what is, how do you use environmentally preferred materials? Those are the four that we really have to focus on as a data center industry, because that's what will have the biggest impact on our supply chain. So today, I don't have time to talk about all four of those, but we wanted to touch a little bit on circular economy and what can that mean in terms of end-of-life treatment for hardware and the longevity of equipment. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you have vendors that embrace a circular economy? So do you have things that are designed where you start with the user, as long as possible, are the products designed to be maintained and prolong their lifespan as long as possible? Once I've determined I can no longer maintain it, is there a strategy in place to take that equipment and reuse and redistribute it? Because if I can reuse and redistribute it, I have to put less carbon into that than I do if I need to remanufacture, which would be our next option. So again, maintain as long as I can, reuse and redistribute if possible. If I can't do that, then I go and I remanufacture it so I can reuse the parts and pieces and remanufacture into a semi-new piece of equipment. And then, only then, if all those other options are out, then you go and look at recycling. And I think as an industry, we tend to think about recycling first, as if I'm recycling, then I'm doing a good job. And that's true, but it's incomplete, because you need to think about all four of these vectors when we think about the circular economy. And the real takeaway here is that this is something, and we work on this as Schneider, is we design our products so that circularity is designed in. It is not something that you can do after the fact. From the time we start designing our products, we think about how do we maintain and prolong, how do we remanufacture, how do we recycle. All of that needs to be comprehended very early in the design process. And this is something Schneider's been working on for quite a while. And this is where it shows up, is basically in what we call our product environmental profile. And it shows what is the materials that we're using inside of our products. What is our compliance? How much is recycled content? What is the recyclability? What is the embodied carbon footprint? So, a product environmental profile or environmental product declaration, that's what contains this information. So you should be challenging all of your vendors to produce one of these profiles, because it's a very easy litmus test to see if they're doing the right things. Are they designing the products from the beginning for a circular economy? This is a great litmus test to see if they can do that. And so this is something we've been taking very seriously as Schneider as part of it. So we really think the criteria for vendor selection is starting to change. I would say in the past, it's been about, do you have the product? Is it the price I want? Do you have the features I want? Do you have the supply chain? Can you supply it where I need it, when I need it? And in the future, we think those will continue to be important. But where's your energy sourcing, Schneider? Like, how green is that? What about your environmental, social, corporate governance? Will also start playing into who you use with your supply chain. And we intend to release a white paper to talk about this in more detail. But if 99% of the problem is in scope 3 and in your supply chain, then these types of questions have to start coming to your vendors. And this is something that we are trying to very much drive the industry in that direction. So fundamentally, it comes down to, where are you on your climate journey? Are you just beginning? Do you think you're advanced? Do you think you're reshaping the industry towards net zero? These are all questions that you can ask yourself, and certainly, again, with our climate advisory services and with some of the other capabilities that we've been putting in place as a company over the last number of years, we look forward to helping partner with companies to take them on this journey as well. And it's not that we're new to this. This is something that we've been working on. We've had a team that's been working with these different companies, and here are some of the proof points of success stories that we've had with various customers in the market, and some of the results that we've given them when we've gotten to partner around some of their carbon footprint. So here are the key takeaways. So very simply, number one, how do you organize and prioritize around data center sustainability? And again, you can rely on experts to help you navigate it. You can try and do it yourself, but it needs to come from a very strategic part of the company to start driving the change that you might need. Number 2, start with scope 2 emissions. Look at your energy mix, look to clean technologies, reduce your footprint. And then number 3, address the carbon impact of your supply chain. So that is all I had for today. I thank you very much for your time, and I hope some of this was insightful for you. And certainly we look forward to any feedback as, again, we know this is a journey that we're just starting as an industry, and Schneider is very excited to engage in the debate.